Hey everybody, before starting this week's episode, we wanted to stop and talk a little bit about the sponsor of our episodes, and that is Expedition Roasters, the artisanal roasters of pop culture inspired coffees.
You know, in these stressful times where we can't go to the parks and experience all of our favorite things and get those wonderful smells, it's nice to have a bit of that with us here at home, and you can definitely have that with Expedition Roasters.
Yeah, and there's a myriad of flavors that you could choose from depending on kind of what you want to reminisce about in a certain way. I mean, you could easily choose Route 66 Tire Fix, which is their morning blend coffee, which, you know, obviously is reminiscent of Cars.
Yes.
So imagine walking into Cars Land, the asphalt fresh with the water that is evaporating after they cleaned off the entire area, fresh in the morning. You just walked in the gates, something like that. Or you could do Fortune and Glory, which is their Indiana Jones inspired coffee, which is bourbon streusel.
That's so good.
So-
But my favorite is Happily Never After.
Yes, your favorite is Happily Never After, and I have to say that one of my favorites is the Wonderland Coffee Crumb Cake.
That's
so
good.
and for all you coffee drinkers out there, it is such a well-balanced mix of flavor and the actual coffee flavor.
And the bags are super pretty.
Yeah, the artwork on the bags are pretty incredible, and you could actually buy the art on the website itself too.
Yeah.
From the actual bags.
Which you
So-
should, because it's so cool.
Yes. So if you find yourself needing a little bit of a pick-me-up, but you want to reminisce a little bit about the parks, I would highly suggest checking out Expedition Roasters, heading over to expeditionroasters.com and purchasing some coffee from them. You could definitely use our coupon code for your first time purchasing coffee, which is a Duo15 at checkout. And remember, brew your happy place. Expedition Roasters, an adventure in every bag.
Hi, and welcome to the Theme Park Duo podcast. Grab your park map, churro, and hop in line with us as we take you on a coast-to-coast adventure through the world of theme parks, haunts, conventions, and more. Now, here's your hosts, Nikki and Gabriel.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of the Theme Park Duo podcast. I'm Gabe,
And I'm Nikki.
and we are the Theme Park Duo. Hopefully, you are as excited as we are to listen to this wonderful interview that we have with designer Dave Cobb.
It's a good one.
It's really, really, really good. We run the gamut
Yeah.
of his career, really.
And he's just such an easy guy to talk to.
Yeah,
Like, we could have talked for another hour.
We could have.
Yeah.
He was the one who suggested drinks, so
Yeah.
we already like him off the bat.
Yup.
So, made a very good first impression. But we're really excited for everybody to have a listen to our season finale episode, as it were. So, but before we jump into any of that, let's jump into the Theme Park Bulletin. So the first bit of news that we have today that we're going to be talking about is the fact that Universal Orlando Resort released their, quote, first look at the Velocicoaster ride vehicles for their new roller coaster, Velocicoaster. And they are pretty.
Mm-hmm.
They look like an expensive sports car is what
Yeah.
they look like, doesn't it?
It looks like if Tesla designed a roller coaster.
It's like Tesla mixed with Lamborghini with Jurassic Park logos on it.
Yeah.
So it looks like the headrests have lights in it, and then it almost has like this gigantic light in the front of it as well.
It almost looks like it's going to become sentient and take over.
It's like part of Cyberdyne.
A little bit. It looks like Cyberdyne Systems.
A little bit, yeah, I
Yeah.
could see that. The very futuristic looking roller coaster train here, but I'm rather impressed by the design. It's something very different. It's something that we haven't really seen before from Universal.
Yeah.
You know, if you think about it, most of the ride vehicles, they're not as sleek as this. I mean, the closest I would say to this level of sleekness would be the Incredible Hulk roller coaster, the redo version of it.
Yeah, yeah.
You know, that one really looked like a Lamborghini, and they actually almost looked like it had headlights on it too.
Yeah.
So this is something very similar in the same vein. So I definitely like the design, and I like the futuristic look to it. I wonder how long it'll take for those lights to go out, though.
And stay out forever.
To stay out forever.
Oh, no.
And for there to be sweat stains in the seats.
It depends.
Depends on how hot it is.
Well, it's Florida.
Depends
so.
on how sweaty you are.
So, like a week.
Oh.
Okay, I don't know.
That makes sense.
I don't.
Twitter poll, how long does it take for you to get sweaty?
Hey, that's my thing.
Sorry. It's the season finale. I'm switching it up.
If you initiate the Twitter poll, is it actually going to be a Twitter poll?
No, it's not.
Oh, so okay, it's a joke either way.
Yeah, it's a joke either way.
Fine.
but all in all, I'm really excited about this ride. It says that the extreme coaster vehicle will catapult guests more than 70 miles per hour, 150 feet in the air. The unique look and design of the speed and engineered for the hunt, making it a perfect for Florida's tallest and fastest launch coaster. So I think it's interesting that we're getting all these little facts now when we already knew a long time ago that it was called Velocicoaster, that we're getting a new coaster, that we're getting A, B, C, D, E, F, G. We're just getting the finer details now.
Yeah.
I blame Alicia Stella for that. She's somebody who's on Twitter who does her research very well and has these ways of getting information that nobody else has, which is really interesting. So I definitely blame her. And Lee Malaby, deal with it. It's called Velocicoaster. You're going to have to call it that. So too bad. But yeah, no, really, really excited about this new attraction coming to Universal Orlando Resort. So next time we're out there, we'll be able to ride it.
Oh, yeah, we will.
So, and then the next piece of news that we're going to be talking about is Universal released first look images and videos of Super Nintendo World at Universal Studios Japan and the Mario Kart interactive ride, which I believe is called Mario Kart Koopa's Challenge.
Something like that.
I think that's what it's called. I have to say that I was almost nearly in tears watching the video and looking at these photos.
It is so unbelievably impressive.
It's so busy.
Yeah.
It's so incredibly busy. There's so much happening in this land, and it feels very compact.
Yeah.
I feel like the moment I walk in here is going to be like the moment that you walked in the Hogsmeade for the first time.
Oh, probably.
I'm going to cry.
Yep.
I'm going to sob, and I'm going to be dorking out hardcore. Because even just looking at these photos, it's just astounding.
It's beautiful.
It's almost the complete antithesis to Hogsmeade.
Yeah.
And Diagon Alley.
Yeah, but also it's crazy because like sometimes when you're looking at the videos, your brain doesn't quite compute that you're not looking at a video game screen. You know,
it's actually a real tangible thing that someone built.
It doesn't feel like real life, and I feel like that you'll get that same feeling when you're there in person.
Oh, 100%, because I feel like when you're walking around this area, at least what I could tell from the videos and the photos, there's so many little itty-bitty details to the land that it'll take multiple visits or even just you standing there for hours on end just pointing out the small cool details.
Yeah.
From the multiple coins that are spinning on landings, to the Goombas, to the Thwomps, to the clouds, to the piranha plants. Just there's so many little itty bitty details and call outs to the video game that it will take some time for nerds like me to sit there and just appreciate all of it.
Yeah.
And kind of going inside of the attraction, you have this gigantic statue of Koopa, of Bowser.
Yeah.
Don't get all excited, Bowser, because our dog's name is Bowser. And he's looming there, ready and kind of teasing you coming into the attraction. And the ride vehicles are absolutely beautiful.
Yeah.
They look like Mario Kart carts, which is so much fun. And it's 4 riders per.
Two in front, two in back.
So per vehicle. And each person is given a headset of augmented reality visors, if you will. And it looks like the top portion of that looks like a Mario hat, or probably other characters as well, like a Luigi hat.
Probably.
Or, hopefully they did like Waluigi and Wario hats too for that. But I'm guessing they're hiding a battery pack with that hat.
Yeah, probably. That seems right.
I'm really interested to see how the AR works with the attraction, because this isn't something that we've necessarily seen before on an attraction of this kind. It's on almost like a roller coaster type track.
Yeah.
So I'm just, it's like one of those things where my brain can't compute
because you haven't experienced anything like it. Yeah.
So the entrance to this attraction is Bowser's Castle. So the fact that you get to go into Bowser's Castle to go on a Mario ride, oh my god. You walk by all the iconic trophy cups that you win throughout the games. We play Mario Kart so often, but I've been playing Mario Kart since I was like 5. So being able to see tangible, real versions of these trophies that I've grown up wanting to get because I wanted to be my older brother at Mario Kart is pretty freaking cool. So really, really looking forward to this. And also a little bit more information. The ride height requirement for this attraction is 48 inches and 36 inches accompanied by an adult. And the ride is approximately 5 minutes long. So the Mario Kart attraction isn't the only attraction that they released photos of. They actually released some photos of a Yoshi Adventure attraction, which you basically jump inside Yoshi like you do.
Well, yeah, like you're riding him.
Like
yeah.
you're riding him like Mario, and it's a slow moving kind of like Omni Mover attraction, if you will. So, and that one's a 48-inch requirement and a 33-inch requirement accompanied by adult. So there's
I
those.
love Yoshi. I'm excited
you
about
are
that one.
You wanted to name our dog Yoshi.
I did.
He's not a Yoshi though.
And I also bought a Nintendo Switch entirely just to play Yoshi's Crafted World.
Which you didn't beat.
I haven't finished yet.
How long ago was that?
Let's not talk about that.
We can talk about how you cried in Best Buy.
Because I wanted Yoshi's Crafted World.
There's a lot of stories of you crying.
There's a lot of stories of you crying, too.
That's not true.
Yeah.
Name one.
Seeing the castle in Walt Disney World.
That's... Okay, name two.
Diagon Alley.
Okay, name three.
Stop.
See, there's only two.
My point is proven.
Okay, fine. Also, the land will be interactive, which is pretty cool because they'll be selling these wristbands, and you'll be able to interact with the land in different ways, also with an app on your phone. So
Cool.
There's an interactive portion to this whole land, which I think is kind of essential because it's a video game based land.
Yeah, yeah.
So there's no way that you'd be able to build a land revolving around a video game without it being interactive.
They also, in that picture, the person in the picture has a big thing on their wrist.
That's what I was talking about, the wristbands.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I tuned you out.
What?
I do
We're
that a
recording a
lot.
podcast. How do you tune me out when we're recording a podcast?
I just respond and hope it's appropriate.
Thanks. Anyway, watch, like, in 5 minutes, she's just going to respond, and it's going to be completely some random non sequitur, not related to this at all.
17.
There you go. So the wristband thingies are power-up bands, and those will allow guests to engage in different challenges with the mobile app that I mentioned. So you get to like jump and punch the question mark boxes and things like that,
Oh,
collect
got it.
coins and keys to the land, and even lead up to an epic boss battle with Bowser Jr. So there's a lot of really cool things that are coming up with this land that I'm really excited because it's being built in Orlando and it's also being built in Hollywood, which right now, if you were to go up to the top of one of the parking structures, you can actually see it being built.
Yeah.
So really unbelievably excited about this new addition coming to Universal Studios Hollywood, although I know that is a little bit ways away. This version of Universal Studios Japan is going to be opening on February 4th of 2021, so that's right around the corner for them. We're really close.
Maybe if we, have the same stuff, if there's any bugs, they'll fix them.
Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So I'm hoping that those things will be adjusted for future versions of the attraction and not for some reason turn one 3D for no freaking reason. I'm looking at you, Forbidden Journey. I'm looking at you. So,
Yeah.
very excited about those two additions coming to Universal Parks. Shout out to SoCal Exploring because I just got all this info off of their website.
Yes, it was very
So thank
neatly
you very much. Check out SoCal
presented.
Exploring.
Yeah.
Scott does some really, really great stuff. So also check out his YouTube channel. Covers a lot of theme park and themed entertainment pieces. So cool guy. Anyway, to the last bit of news that we're going to be covering here in the theme park bulletin is information that literally just came out not too long ago that California is going to go back into a stay-at-home order. So that pretty much means everyone's quarantining again for 3 weeks, which means that all food locations and restaurants have to stop serving food and things like that. And that means it's going to be affecting theme parks
Yep.
again.
And
Not
parks
that they were
yeah,
open. But
parks and zoos are closing, so that
Yeah.
affects SeaWorld just announced that they will be closing starting
Yeah.
the 7th, things like that. So.
Yeah, and right now Knott's has said that as of tomorrow, which tomorrow is the 7th of December, that they're stopping Taste of Merry Farm until they're allowed to do it again.
Yeah.
So there's no word on whether or not Taste of Merry Farm is officially canceled for the rest of the year. There's no word on pretty much any of that. And SeaWorld is the only park that has officially said, as of right now, as of this recording, SeaWorld is the only park to officially say, we are just closing.
Yeah.
Disney has to roll back some stuff because now they have to close their restaurants and food service stuff in downtown Disney, as well as Buena Vista Street, things like that. So it'll be interesting to see the effect it has on everything.
Yeah.
It is a little sad that we have to kind of revert back, but whatever it takes in order to move forward in a positive way. Right now, it's just about wearing a mask, being careful, following the rules, not going to these huge gatherings. That's how we're going to make progress to opening the parks back up again. Because obviously you see the opposite thing happening in Florida, where you have DeSantis having huge gatherings of people with no masks. Parks are just open, limited capacity, but parks are open, people wearing masks, things like that. So it's a very different world out there in Florida.
Yeah.
So compared to California over here, where it seems like we're way stricter, which isn't necessarily a bad thing, but I don't want to delve too deep into the political aspects of it.
Yeah.
But it's just the nature of the world right now.
Yep. You got to do what you got to do to keep people alive and healthy. So
Pretty much.
That's the bottom line. It's the big picture.
And we just have to get to a point where the parks can open up and just operate normally, because they can't. It's not feasible for them to operate at limited capacity for an extended period of time.
Yeah.
It's just not. It's not a good business model.
Yeah.
It's not, and they weren't built to do that kind of a thing either.
Yeah.
So sooner that we can get there, the sooner that other people get their jobs back and things can return to normal. So just wear a mask, be safe, be smart about it, and hopefully we can get our lives back together in well-working order, so that we can go have a butterbeer in Hogsmeade again.
I want a butterbeer so bad.
Sorry.
It's okay.
We could have went to City Walk, but now it's too late.
I know. I missed my chance.
You vetoed a trip.
I cursed the day that Gabe was like, hey, let's go to City Walk right now. And I said no. I wanted sleep.
Well, you were like, cases are going up. I don't know if I want to go.
Hey, maybe it was a smart decision.
Yeah,
maybe I saved our lives,
Could
Gabe.
have had COVID right now.
I might have saved our lives.
You don't know.
I don't know.
Yeah, you don't know. Anyway, moving on from the news, let's jump into our wonderful interview with Dave Cobb. We are so lucky today to be joined by a wonderful human being that we've been talking to on Twitter back and forth. We've been trying to make it work, trying to get him on the show.
And it finally happened.
happened. He's finally here. We are pleased to be joined by our friend Dave Cobb, an attraction designer of some of the wonderful attractions that I'm sure a lot of you have been on. Welcome to the show, sir.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. Hi, howdy.
We are very excited to have you here. And also, you had a very, very good suggestion, and that was to have drinks prior to and during recording, which I don't know why we didn't think of that.
I mean,
cheers,
that's we usually do anyway.
Yeah, no, cheers to that, everybody. Yes. So you're already fitting in well with the theme park duo. That is exactly what needs to happen. But
you're my kind of people.
But we're very thankful to have you here. And I mean, it's funny because when we were kind of talking on Twitter and stuff, I said there's so much to talk about and how much time do we have and stuff. So we're gonna try to run the gamut of some of your career's work and some of the things that maybe some people didn't know you worked on, and some of the more famous things that some of your fans knew you worked on. So hopefully you'll have your car ready for a trip down memory lane.
Of course. Those roads are a little dusty sometimes, so I have to get out the map and reroute myself. But yes, I'm happy to go down those roads.
As we were kind of talking before recording, you were talking about kind of how varied your career has been. You've done not only attraction design at major theme parks, here in the U.S. and abroad, but you've also done museum exhibits and many other varied themed entertainment pieces of work. And so having been so prolific in those many different kind of variations, there has to be a certain level of love for the industry as a whole. So where do you think your love for the themed entertainment experience kind of came from? Where is that genesis of that love for the industry?
That's a great question. I would say, like most other theme park fans and nerds and foamers, if you haven't heard that term, the industry often calls you foamers.
Wait, I haven't heard that.
I've never heard that term.
Theme park foamer, because we foam at the mouth sometimes with our passion.
No, that's fitting.
Yeah, it's mostly Twitter, mostly Diz Twitter that foams at the mouth.
Yeah. But and I love you, Diz Twitter, even though you're sometimes wrong, but I love you anyway. I guess mine started like a lot of people in that, I grew up in LA, so I grew up in the shadow of Disneyland and Universal and Magic Mountain. And all three of those places were like, where a lot of my friends got summer jobs and that kind of thing. So I was a annual pass holder at Universal back when it was still the Universal Studios tour, before they even had any rides, and it was just the tram tour and the stunt shows and things.
Oh, cool.
And
That's
back
really
then,
cool.
well, and back then the annual pass was like $15. It was ridiculous. So it was I had one. I got one as a kid, and I used to ride my bike there and ride the tram like 4 times and that kind of thing. So that was sort of the neighborhood passion. And then, living in Southern California, you do a couple trips to Disneyland every year with your family.
Yeah.
And once my friends could drive, that became more often. And I got one of the very first annual passes they offered in like 1984 or 85. I was like 15, and so it started that way. It started just being a fan of the form, if you will. Like I dug it because I was a theater kid, and I thought I wanted to work in movies, particularly in special effects production. And so I was a child of the 70s who grew up with the blockbuster era. And in school, I was a theater nerd and an actor and loved working behind the scenes and all of that stuff. So it was all of that in one big pot. And then the sort of culminating moment of that was my first job in a park. Well, I'll say my first actual like real job. You're gonna laugh at this. Do you remember when Sears used to have a thing called the Halloween shop at Sears?
No.
It was a pop up inside Sears. When Sears was a thing, and it was open for like 2 months, and it was all crappy costumes and makeup and things, right? And in California, you can work at 15, I think, with a working permit, right? Yeah. And so I did that. The only reason I took the job is I got to dress up in costume every day. So like I literally got to put on, I think I put on makeup and costume as Rum Tum Tugger from Cats like 4 times. It was just ridiculous. Cause I was a nerd and queer and, and didn't know it and all that stuff. So that was the first job, but my real first theme park job was right as I was graduating high school. I went and got a summer job at Universal Studios as a tour guide. And so I sat on the trams and gave the tours, and I did that job for about 6 years in the middle, in as a summer job and a weekend job, and while I was going to school and trying to get a foothold into the entertainment industry in movie production. So that was where I realized, this is a place where this is not only a job to work at the park, but people actually make these things.
Yeah, it's interesting because when you go as a kid, it's you really just the oohs and ahs of kind of the experience. But as you become a little bit more cognizant of those experiences, it becomes more or less of the, there's actually people whose jobs are solely based on entertaining me while I'm on this ride.
Yeah.
which is kind of how my interest got piqued when I was a kid, because I grew up in Orange County. Yeah. I went to Disneyland, Knott's Berry Farm, Universal, Six Flags, just like you were kind of talking about.
Yeah.
As a kid, I would make a list, as my parents would be like, we're going to Disneyland in like a month. I would make a list of like times of saying, okay, from 10 to 10:05, that's our bathroom break. And then from 10:06 to 10:15, that's when we're doing Matterhorn.
Your parents loved
Yeah,
you,
my parents loved it, of course.
Oh, that's
they
great.
Loved every second of that.
So you were like the tour guide putting together the itinerary, basically.
Yeah, an itinerary that nobody listened to. Nobody cared. It was just kind of like a napkin in the backpack that people needed if they needed to wipe something up. But I mean, like that was me as a kid. I love the experience of going, and as a kid, I didn't know that was the case, that people built this stuff and had a career in that. Mm-hmm. And, for me, I work in TV and that kind of stuff. So it's kind of like a adjacent thing for me, because it's all about storytelling, which I love.
Yeah.
So, slowly but surely, when along with maturity, and I'm sure this is the case with you and the same with me, along with my maturity came with different viewpoints on that experience and different appreciation with that experience, with the storytelling and capturing people's imaginations.
Yeah, absolutely. And like, so I said I wanted to work in film, and a curious thing happened while I was going to film school at Cal State Northridge in the late 80s, early 90s. A couple of things happened. Like couple of the big writer strikes happened then. Mm-hmm. And then so production got really slow. And so I wasn't doing as much. I was trying to do freelance production jobs in between the weekend and summer job at the tour and going to school. And that sort of started to dry up. And then the other interesting thing that happened was I was aiming at cinematography, in particularly in special effects cinematography. I wanted to work in miniatures and cloud tanks and stop motion and all those things that you saw in like Starlog and Cinefex magazine that I was obsessed with. And in the early 90s, what happened? We got Terminator 2, The Abyss, Jurassic Park, CG started to happen. And so all the companies that I was trying to line up for internships were closing. And they were all saying, go get a computer science degree. And I was not a computer guy, not in that sense, not a programmer type. And so I actually dropped out of school. And I was like, I need to figure out what I want to do now. So I was at the tour full time for a while and sort of ended up doing VIP tours there. And one of the people I gave VIP tours to all the time was an executive there, one of the executives for the park. His name was... Warren Holcomb was his name, super nice guy. And I was going to a family trip in Florida to go to Epcot and Walt Disney World and stuff. And he said, let me set up, I'll set up a tour for you over at the Universal Florida site that was under construction.
Whoa.
And so,
That's cool.
so I went and I got a little golf court tour of, it was all dirt. There was barely any steel up, but then I went to the production trailer for the project, and I saw the model for the park, and it was like, that's amazing, awesome. And I went back and just gushed at him like, this is incredible. And he's like, well, if you want to meet the people that do this, I can set that up anytime. And I sort of filed that away in my brain, not really thinking of it as work, but like, oh, he's a nice guy, and he realizes I like this stuff as a consumer, and that's all that landed with me at that point. And then flash forward like 2 years later, I take a trip back to see the park. About 3 years later, I go back to see Universal Florida when Back to the Future opens. And keep in mind that I worked on Back to the Future 2 and 3 for like 2 or 3 days as a camera assistant. And I drove by Hill Valley a million times as a tour guide. And I saw the original Back to the Future like 6 times in the theater, rode my bike to the theater every time in 1985. So like,
so you're a fan.
Yeah, I'm a total fan, and so I rode the ride, and it blew my mind, and exactly for the reason you're talking about. I'm like, oh my god, they made a sequel. Like, it's got
yeah, exactly.
It's got Biff in it. It's got Doc Brown. It's not like retelling you the events of the movie. It's something that takes your love of the movie and takes it somewhere else. And my head just exploded in the same way that, you know, probably about 5 or 6 years earlier in '87. When I saw Star Tours for the first time, right? It's like, oh, I'm in the Death Star trench battle. That's amazing, right? And it was a different way of telling a story that we hadn't really seen in theme parks in that way. And so I went back to the same guy on a VIP tour and said, oh my God, Back to the Future is like the best thing I've ever seen. And he's like, would you like to meet the people who made it? I'm like, sure. So he sets me up on lunch, and I go and meet some folks, and I have lunch with them. I get home from that lunch after just nerding out all over them for a good hour and asking them every question I could about the ride and learning all about it. I get home and there's a answering machine message waiting for me saying, you know, we're building this in Hollywood and we're starting to staff up the production office, and we've got an assistant like PA position for you. If you want it, it's yours.
Wow.
That's so
That's
cool.
amazing. That's dream come true status right there.
Completely. And I was like, sure. I mean, it was like, you know, minimum wage. It wasn't any more money than I was making as a tour guide. And so I just took it just out of blind faith, really, mainly because of my love for Back to the Future. But what I ended up getting was, you know, roughly 24-month education in how you go from you go from dirt to opening day, and how that works, and seeing that happen. And so it was this massive education in, oh, this is an actual industry with all these different disciplines and things. And the punchline to all this, and the reason I tell you all this is the punchline. The punchline is, the ride opens, I'm there opening day, my dad is there with me celebrating, you know, and I introduce him to Michael J. Fox and to Alan Silvestri, who wrote the music, and Robert Zemeckis and Bob Gale. Like, they're there, and I'm just freaking out. And
oh my God.
And they all know us because they work on the lot, and they came up for rides before opening. Like, Bob Gale's office would call us every day. He's like, are you testing today? And we're like, come on up, Bob. So, so the punchline is, my dad's there, and we're sitting over having a cocktail, sort of celebrating the day. And he says, this is a really good fit for you. And keep in mind, my dad was a recruiter. He was a corporate headhunter for a long time. So he's coached me for years in, you know, job negotiation and that kind of thing. And he said to me, this is a really good fit for you. Do you remember the time I took you to Imagineering? And I'm like, wait, what? And he said, you were like 7 or 8, and I picked you up from school, and I had one more business meeting. And so I took you there. And so as he's telling me, I slowly start to remember, but I was pretty young, so I don't really remember it. He's like, yeah, we took you there. We went to 1401 Flower, and I handed you off to a nice secretary while I went into my meeting, and she gave you a tour of the Epcot model in 1978.
Oh my gosh. God.
And
that must have left a visible imprint, a Spaceship Earth framed imprint on your brain.
Right. And everybody says that. Everybody's like, that must have been the moment that you knew. And I'm like, you know what? I didn't, because my exposure to that world was through my dad, which was like engineers and project managers and architects, all of stuff that I found fascinating, but not me as a nerdy theater kid. Like, it just didn't land, right?
Yeah.
However, the minute he told me that, it was like the moment in Ratatouille at the end when he bites into the ratatouille and zooms back to his childhood. That happened. That literally happened to me that moment. And I went, oh my God, I totally remember. And from that point, I went, all right, I guess this is what I need to focus on. And then I just hustled.
Yeah. And, oh my God, what a story.
Yeah.
I could totally relate too, because, Indiana Jones is one of my favorite movies of all time. Like, I used to fall asleep to that movie. Like, completely fall asleep to it. Like, just put the thing on the TV and it would play and I would pass out, and then in the middle of the night I'd wake up to turn it off because it's on the menu screen. It's just playing the loop of the music over and over and over. But, obviously Indiana Jones Adventure opened up in 1995 over at Disneyland Adventureland, and I was, sorry if this ages you, but I think I was like 5 or 6 when that opened up.
Yep.
And at that age, normally a 5 or 6-year-old doesn't know what Indiana Jones is.
Yeah.
I did. I did, because I watched it without permission and I loved it. and I was so scared. I was so scared because it's a pretty intimidating attraction. You're going into this gigantic temple.
Dark and spooky.
It is really dark and spooky. It wasn't until I actually forced myself to go on that ride till that love for attractions really kicked in. And it was kind of like what you're talking about, that love for Back to the Future, and then working on the Back to the Future attraction. It was that love for Indiana Jones, and then finally going on the ride and just being entranced at how did the boulder work? How did the cars move? How did the 3 doors work? And wanting to know how every aspect of that attraction worked in order to make me feel the way that I did. And even at that age, I fully still didn't comprehend it. Nikki's looking at me like with this, like, oh my God, he's so cute.
No, it's funny because like that was you at 5, but then like my experience with you with any new ride you go on
I cry.
No, we ride it once for you to enjoy it, and then we ride it a second time for you to basically just look backwards the whole time.
Yep. That's true.
So it's just funny because I was like, nothing's changed.
That's so true, because I ride Transformers and I don't wear the glasses and I'm just looking at everything. Because to me, that ride is so much fun to look around at, to watch the mechanics.
It's funny that you say that about riding it when you're a kid, because I have 2 similar stories from my niece and nephew that it completely encapsulate that. They don't work in the industry, but it is a testament to the power of the stuff that we do, right? My nephew, when he was about, I don't know, 10 or 11, came down to Florida, to Orlando to visit, and while I was working on Men in Black, and he was a scaredy cat. He was an absolute scaredy cat. He wouldn't go on any coasters, anything big.
That's
and
me.
He was, and I'm not the kind of, I'm not going to force him to go. I would always encourage him. I'm like, I think you'll like it, but let him, suss it out. And then we walked past Dueling Dragons when it was still Dueling Dragons, and I got his hand in mine, and he stops and he looks at those 2 big dragon sculptures, and he sees the coasters go through the loop, and his eyes are like saucers. And I'm like, all right, buddy, let's go. And he's like, no, let's go do this. And I said, are you sure? I don't want to make you do it. And he's like, yeah, I'm sure. Let's go before I change my mind. And through the whole queue, and the queue is freaking him out. And it's because it's dark and spoopy with like
There's
skulls and things, skeletons,
dead knights.
Yeah, right. And I keep telling him, I'm like, at any point, even right before we get on, you can bug out anytime. And he's like, no, I want to do this. So we get on the ride, and we're in. I put him in the middle seat, and I take the outside, so it's not too scary. And I have my hands on the bars. I have my left hand intertwined with his right hand in his bar, holding his hand. And we ride it, and we're riding it, and everybody on the train is screaming. He is silent as a mouse. I can't really see him because he's so tiny, and his head's back behind the headrest. And I'm really worried, because I don't hear a peep. And then we hit the final break zone at the very end of the ride, and I hear, "Yeah!"
That's amazing.
And it was like he broke open, and it was like we couldn't. He couldn't go on the coasters enough for the rest of the trip because it was like he finally proved to himself that he could do it, and that's what these things are. If they're a thrill ride or if they're a dark and scary ride, like my niece, she's a little older. Her similar story is, we were doing a sleepover at Uncle Dave's house, and we were watching some spooky movies. And I started out on the simple stuff, nothing too gory. Like I think it was Jaws and Psycho, and Deep Blue Sea was one they loved because it was scary sharks. And
I like Deep Blue Sea.
Yeah, it's a good movie.
I love that movie. I love LL Cool J in that movie is the best.
Right?
Poor
just-
Samuel L.
He
Jackson
just
though.
pissed off.
Oh, I know.
Surprise killed.
That's such a great jump scare. That's one of the best in film history. But after that, a couple months later, it was Halloween, and she's like, "Uncle Dave, will you take me to Halloween Horror Nights?"
What?
Whoa.
And I'm like, she's like 13, and I'm like, "Oh,
That's about the right age. That's about the right age, right?
So we go super early, so it's still a little bit light out, right? And at first she's like cowering behind me. Me and my husband Jason, we both take her. We're like sandwiched around her through it, and she's shrieking and screaming, but comes out of it like, "Oh my God, that was so cool!" And so the punchline there is she's now like the biggest horror fan I know. She's got like horror tattoos, and like she's it was a moment that changed her perception of her own abilities and her own taste and what she's interested in. And it's one stories like that, both happening in theme parks, remind me that it's not just fandom. These are creating stories in the real world or experiences in the real world can change people, and that is a responsibility that we have in this industry that I do not take lightly.
No, and I think that's something to really hold high, like you said, not take lightly, especially because so many people do have these lasting lifetime memories of these experiences, and I can so relate to both those stories.
I relate to your nephew because my introduction to coasters was Goliath.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
And it was the exact same thing. Like I was like sweating, the whole way through the queue, and then I get off the ride after, and I'm like, okay, what's next? Like it just like it's a light switch,
Yeah,
It's
completely.
So I totally relate to that. And I know Gabe relates to the Halloween Horror Night story.
Yeah. For me, I was totally scared to go to Scary Farm. I was terrified because it's one of those things in SoCal. It's a tradition. Every fall, everybody talks about Scary Farm. Everybody does. It's like, we're gonna go, and especially in high school and like junior high, people are like, we're gonna go with girls. This whole thing. And I built it up so much in my head, and I finally forced myself to go. And it was this thing where it becomes an obsession because you feared it so much.
Right.
I feared Pennywise as a kid. Now I have so much Pennywise things. I was so scared of Scary Farm, and now I have a Knott's K tattooed on my leg. So
that's awesome.
It's a thing. But no, I can totally relate to all of that. And I find it so interesting because it was your love of movies that really connected you to the industry. And funny enough, kind of like later down in your career, you actually started working in as a senior creative director with Paramount Pictures, correct?
Yes, Paramount Parks, right.
Yeah, and you started kind of establishing movie IPs with rides and kind of things of that nature. And you had some very hard jobs, because I would not know how to apply Survivor to an attraction at all.
Yeah.
Because, like movies like The Italian Job, of course, that lends itself perfectly to like a roller coaster.
Yeah.
But things like Survivor and School of Rock, not so necessarily as easy to apply to, a themed entertainment experience. So when it came to that kind of side of things, how were you able to kind of figure out and traverse it so that it somewhat kind of made sense to the experience?
Well, it was very interesting how that job came about. It was post Men in Black, so I had just worked on this, nearly $100 million dark ride, and I was freelancing, and I ended up freelancing for Paramount. They had two operations that were theme park related. One was called Paramount Parks, which is the chain of parks they used to own: Kings Island, Kings Dominion, Canada's Wonderland, Carowinds, and Star Trek Adventure in Vegas. And so that was the sort of regional park operations. And then at the studio, they had a small design office that was doing concepts to use Paramount IP for international parks. And so they were separate but the same. They were all under the Paramount Parks banner. And I was hired to do some freelance work in LA, designing around some of the bigger IP for big overseas multi-billion-dollar, like tentpole, world-class theme parks. That business for them was really more about design and licensing. They still haven't built one. You've heard all about like the London park for a while, and I hope they build something because they have some great IP, and I worked on many great ideas there. But from a business perspective, they were in it for like, we're going to get the licensing, and then whoever buys this concept goes and funds it. They didn't want to own or operate anything because their experience with owning and operating in the States was actually coming to a close in the early aughts. They had done a lot of design in the parks. They brought in things like Days of Thunder and Tomb Raider and SpongeBob, and they had done a lot of that out of the Charlotte office. Was the in North Carolina was where they had all the design. So I'm working on these international projects for them, and they scaled down the operation in Charlotte. And sort of lean on the LA office saying, hey, you guys are now going to do designs for the parks here in the States. This was in about 2003 or 4, I think. So I transitioned into a full-time job working for an established regional park chain, which was very different than the work that the $100 million attractions that I built for places like Universal, and equally challenging, but in a completely different way. And so it was luck that job came about, but I really valued that part of my career because of how I had to think creatively and differently. It wasn't about budget; it was about authenticity to the IP and what is the core value or core experience that people want out of it. And so, how do you translate that not into a $100 million attraction, but into a $8 million attraction? So it was a fun challenge. And to your point, we did a ride based on Survivor. For listeners, if you don't know, look it up. I actually did an interview with Ace, with American Coaster Enthusiasts, about it. You can find online. That's a lot of fun. It was at Great America in Santa Clara. Oh, that's the other one I didn't mention. Great America in Northern California was a Paramount park for a while too. So they had a ride system already picked. They knew they wanted that disco coaster, which if you haven't been on one, they're actually a ton of fun.
That's like Zamperla's disco coaster thingy, right? Is that Zamperla?
Yes. Yep. And it's not a standard spinner. It's not a standard flat. It actually feels like a coaster. I love it so much we put it in the Warner Brothers World Abu Dhabi Park as Riddler Revenge, and it's like a sleeper hit of the park. People love it. So but they handed us this hardware and what brand do you want to put this on? And they gave us a short list of brands that they wanted to sort of synergize with. And I hate those words, but it's the truth of the business that we're often handed something. We're handed an IP or a ride system and here, make it work. But it was easy enough to decorate the ride to look like a big tribal drum and make it all look like it's lashed out of bamboo, and give a queue line that goes past the campfire and the mailbox and all of that stuff, and sort of name check all the stuff. And there was graphics banners of all the seasons and all the different logos, and the music's playing in the queue. That's easy. That's low-hanging fruit. But we really said there has to be something about this that's about competition. And how do you do that on a spinner? And so one of the aha moments I had was riding one at another park and realizing that it's got a corral where they count out the 40 or so riders beforehand, and you wait during an entire ride cycle. So I'm like, oh, wait, captive audience, right? So these people that are standing here waiting to go on are a captive audience. And so we devised this thing. At the time, games like Dance Dance Revolution were really popular. And so we devised this idea that was this tribal challenge. And there were monitors above the grouping area. And it was Ethan Zahn and Jenna Marasco from, I think, seasons 2 and 3. And they hosted it for us. And they basically instructed you in... The first thing was a foot stomp, and it was a pattern with like a tribal music going on. The second layer you added on top of that was a hand clap that was a different beat. And then on top of that, you added a tribal chant, and we used their two survivor tribe names, Jabiru and Boran. And so you had to do this stomp with the music. And what it was a timing game that there were 2 points along the ride cycle, the timing of the ride cycle, where you had to stomp and clap accurately and loud enough. And if you succeeded, the ride vehicle was blasted with water. And so you were competing against the other team by soaking them, basically. And you had 2 chances to soak them. And then if you made the final pass at the final score, what's the number one prize in Survivor? Fire. And so we had this big fireball burst over the entry, signifying that you won the tribal challenge. And so, yeah, and it was ridiculously simple in terms of technology. There was no like sensors at people's feet or anything. It was basically a microphone array underneath the loading platform. And we wrote some really cool software that basically listened for pattern matching to a particular timeline. And it was, that whole ride all in with theming and production of the video and everything was, less than the cost of, the churro cart outside of Men in Black. So it was things like that, things like Italian Job, which I'm very proud of, and I love what we did with that in terms of, again, honoring the spirit and the idea of the movie and the car chase and the stunt driving and movie production and that kind of thing. I think we did a really bang up job, and I am grateful for that part of my career because it was not just, hey, blue sky can be anything. You've got $100 million. It was really like, what would I do on it was more like community theater. And that's not a slam against those parks. Those parks are really great. And the regional parks have their own, their own business and their own capital expenditures every year, and it's a different model than a destination park like a Disney or Universal. And I'm very, very grateful for having had that time there.
Well, I'm assuming that working those kinds of jobs that have smaller budgets teach you just different skills to utilize, as opposed to, like you said, working on $100 million attraction.
Yeah, totally, exactly. And it's and it was fun, and it was also fun because I was traveling across the country, and it was a different kind of work. It was a much smaller, scrappier team, and I was actually much closer to the ride vendors. Not that I wasn't on Universal projects, but your budget's so much lower that they're helping out with a lot of the creative development and things like the onboard audio for Italian Job and all that kind of stuff. And so it was a lot more hands-on and a lot scrappier, and I got to go to regional parks. My favorite part of that job was when I would have to go to Kings Island, because if I was staying there I would usually work in the parks for like a week or two at a time and then go home. And my favorite part was when the park's running was I would get up at like 6 a.m. and go into the park when they're running the Beast at first thing in the morning and just get on the Beast and ride it for the test runs for like an hour, and it was like better than coffee. It just woke me up. It was amazing.
Perks of the job. That's awesome.
When I worked post PA jobs on the Universal lot at lunchtime, I would sneak my way into the park and just ride the Mummy, and then get my pizza and then come back to the sound stages. That was always really fun.
Nice. That's great.
Yeah,
that's
perks
great.
of the job. And speaking of, thinking outside the box and working on attractions that people might not know that there are even attractions based off these IPs. Can you talk to us a little bit about your involvement on The Mask 4D at Warner Brothers Movie World Madrid?
This is one of those ones where I was
yes.
like, oh yeah, we got to talk about this.
Yeah. What's funny is I was cleaning out computers over the summer during my transition out of my previous job and going through backup drives and finding old stuff. And I found this video that I had put together actually for a Thea submission for the Mask 4D that we submitted it for excellence on a limited budget because it was literally like a $3 million show. It was nothing.
Wow.
But it was, when that park was being put together, it had Looney Tunes, it had DC Comics, and the Mask is New Line, and it was part of the license. And so I was working at Landmark at the time, the second iteration of Landmark. They were sort of the version I worked the first time around was in the mid '90s, and then they moved to Glendale, and I worked there in the early aughts. And the concept for it had already been done, and basically it was a comedy. The shorthand is a comedy version of like T2 3D, right?
Okay.
So it's a live show that transitions into a 4D show and then back again, and it's much shorter. It's not as long or elaborate as T2, but it starts out as it's a makeup demonstration show because the park is a movie identity, Warner Brothers movie world in Spain, and so the show started out as a behind the scenes look at movie makeup. So in the pre-show you see a bunch of clip reel all about prosthetics and animatronics and horror effects and all that kind of stuff. And then a host comes out, introduces himself, and says, we're gonna do a demonstration live. And he picks somebody out of the audience, and you go into the main theater, and the set is basically a little makeup set of makeup mirrors and a couple of chairs. And he gets the volunteer ready and puts like the stuff on their face, the mold on their face, so you can't see who they are at all, and says, while the mold is setting, let's go. We just got this crate of stuff from the studio in Hollywood. Let's see what they sent us. And he wheels in this crate and he opens it up and he's like, oh, look, it's Batman's cowl. And here's a couple things from other movies. And he's like, what's this? And he pulls out this strange looking wooden mask. Dun, dun, dun. And he doesn't know what it is. And of course it gets sucked onto his face. And in a very simple transition, it's literally one actor like doing a pirouette, swirling around one side of the makeup case or this big storage case, and then the mask coming out the other side, and he's the mask, and he's a fully made up guy, and he's lip syncing to a track, and he decides to screw with the volunteer, who of course is a plant at that point, because of what we do to him on stage. He's a plant, and after doing a bunch of sort of live action cartoon gags, one of my favorites was, he puts a bulletproof vest on the volunteer and asks for a gun, and it falls from the rafters into his hands, and it's like a big Tommy gun, and he goes and like shoots the guy, and the guy's still standing, and then he hands him a glass of water. He takes a sip from it, and like the vest is pre-rigged with water, and it squirts out like he's got bullet holes. Like it's a live action cartoon.
I love that.
So it's a live action cartoon basically, and then so after sort of finishing off the audience volunteer, he tells everybody, now for my final form, for my big finale, and there's a explosion of mist on stage. It's like LN2, just like T2, and when the smoke clears, he's a cartoon. And so it's this little, I guess, minute and a half long sort of finale in 3D, custom animation of the mask, all sorts of jokes and gags, and then he blows up the theater. And we don't have a seat drop, but we have another big LN2 dump through the theater. And when that smoke clears, it's the host reveals that, and he was a plant all along, and we hope you enjoyed the show, and everybody leaves. So it was a very challenging show, not just because of the budget, but because it was produced all in Spanish, in Castilian Spanish. And so like the voice of the mask, this is where I learned sort of international voiceover talent. The voice of the mask in our show is the guy who dubs all of Jim Carrey's movies in Castilian Spanish.
Oh, well, there you go.
So like the studios like use this guy because he's the guy that they will know as familiar. The mask, right?
Yeah.
But my voice is in the show too because we did not want to pay the rights for Cuban Pete because we would have had to pay for it. So I wrote a version of it that's 8 or 10 notes off. That is called Cuban Feet, and it's sung in English, and it's me. And the reason it's me is I was the scratch track, and we were going to hire a professional singer to do it, and we ran out of money.
Oh my gosh.
And so and I have a pretty good singing voice, so it's okay. But but yeah, it ended up being in the show.
That's
because of that.
funny. That's. I also think I saw your face in the queue line for Survivor as well. If I'm correct.
No, not in Survivor.
Oh, that was you? Okay, there was somebody that kind of looked like you then.
Oh, really? Oh, no. You're sorry. Yes, in the pre-show.
Yeah, the pre-show,
yes.
the Q video.
In the pre-show video, me and my husband are both in.
Oh,
That's fun.
that was funny because when we shot it on the load station, and it's shot up in Northern California at the park, and we needed a bunch of people to be park guests, and so it was mostly employees, but there's about 5 guys in there in addition to me and my husband that are just friends of mine in San Francisco. I called them. I'm like, do you get the day off, come be in our movie. And so that, I'm sorry, I completely forgot about that. Yeah, and it's on both video of that and video of The Mask are on my YouTube channel if people want to seek them out. I posted them pretty recently, so they're recent in my upload history.
They were very cool to watch, tell you that much. So I highly suggest everybody go check it out once you're done listening to the show. Don't stop listening to the show and then go watch. Finish and then go watch. You know what I'm saying? We're good there.
Yeah.
But I mean,
Yeah.
it's so cool to see your career kind of change and move paths based on the different movies and IPs that you're kind of working with, and working on different levels of budget and stuff. It really shows how versatile you are and the teams that you're working with are. And now that we've talked about that, I think it's about time that we talk about the thing that both Nikki and I are beyond excited to talk to you about. Also, in fact, all the Universal Orlando fans know your name because of this attraction too, I'm sure, and that is Men in Black Alien Attack. And if I were the designer of this, I would love that written on my tombstone. Just designer of Men in Black Alien Attack, died sometime. It doesn't. I don't know when, but just he was the designer of that. See, I would love that on my tombstone.
That's very sweet. That's very sweet. Thank
but
you.
I do have to say first, before getting into this, that Nikki and I have only been to Universal Orlando Resort once. We actually went as our big hurrah before having a child.
Yeah.
I knew of Men in Black because obviously I've watched Travel Channel, shows where they've talked about the technology and the creation of the aliens and things like that. So I knew of the attraction, but I didn't know what kind of the feeling was when it came to like going on it. So like for us, we knew it was an attraction that we wanted to ride. Little did we know that we were going to leave that vacation having that been our favorite attraction.
I think it was the one we rode the most.
It was the one that we rode the most. I'll tell you this. We skipped over Halloween Horror Nights mazes just to go on it 2 more times.
Yep.
Oh,
that's how many times. That's how much we loved it.
Oh, that makes me very happy. Thank you for that. It's a labor of love, not just for me, but the attractions like this don't happen in a vacuum, and that was the product of hundreds of people and a very challenging schedule and a challenging game system and ride system and all that. So you don't build these things expecting them to have any sort of longevity. Yeah. And especially back then in the Universal parks, they didn't keep stuff for a long time. Yeah. They got rid of things and cycled them out. And so, I was tickled when it hit 5 years, and then, oh my God, 10. And, this past April was its 20th anniversary. And that blows me away that it's been there that long. And in a way, I have to look at what were the attractions that were about that I imprinted on, and how old were they when I imprinted on them? And the biggest one is the Haunted Mansion. So that opened in 1967. I was born in 1970. My first time on it was probably mid-70s when I was 4 or 5, and then I rode it all through my teens and really imprinted on it in my teens and early 20s by the time it was about 20 years old. And so I think, holy crap, there are kids who are going into creative jobs like I am, like I did, who were influenced by this thing we made. And it's mind-boggling. I mean, yes, it makes me feel old, but it's more than that. It's what I said before, that these things can be transformative to people, that can be very important in their lives, and that's why we take them so seriously. Like, these are not these in a world full of corporatized product this business, because they're individual things and not mass produced, have a very different sort of attitude in terms of the people that work on them, because we know they're permanent, and that's gotta, and in a perfect world, we want them to live on as long as they can. And so I'm so tickled when people tell me that it's their favorite attraction. I see it, I look at it, and it's like, it's two things. First of all, I look at it and see nothing but all the stuff I would do differently, or flaws and things, which I don't really talk about because it's not fair. That's just my own BS. Yeah. And then, and then I look at it and I think of it like, it's like my kid I sent off to college, right? It's not mine anymore. And so, and that's okay. But it's like the hardest part of this industry is that I always tell people there's a moment when you're working on these projects after you've worked for years. There's a moment when you're no longer the most important person in the building. And there's a moment when the security guard doesn't recognize you because he wasn't the guy there during construction and he asked for your badge. And it's a little deflating, right? Yeah. It's like, oh, right.
Because you put so much heart and soul into it.
Right. But all of that is made up for by one of my favorite things to do after a ride opens is sit on a bench with my popcorn and my Diet Coke right near the exit and just listen to people talk about it. And that is so gratifying. And it because it is these things you do, it like any artist, right? Once you make your creation, it's not yours anymore. It's the audience's, no matter what you do. And in this industry that happens too, and it literally is like sending your kid to college and, oh look, he's all grown up now.
Yeah.
He's doing pretty good in the world. I'm pretty happy for him.
Well, if you were sitting at the exit when you saw me and Nikki come out of the exit, you would have heard this conversation. Do you want to go on Gringotts? Nah, let's ride this again. Which is
I did love Gringotts, but
well, I disagree with you.
I disagree
with you a little bit, but.
What was your best score?
I honestly don't remember our score at all.
I
know you beat the shit out of me.
I remember for a fact I beat Gabe because
I don't want to talk about it.
No, I do want to talk about it because I was sitting next to I think an employee on her break or when she was off shift who obviously rode
Nikki
it a
low-key
lot.
Cheated.
So I just shot everywhere she shot.
Atta girl. Nicely done. Nicely
I'm
done.
mad.
Do you guys know about? There's a group on Facebook you should join. It's called the 900 Club. They reached out to me. It's called the MIB 900 Club, and they're people that have scored 999,999 on the ride, have maxed it out, and they're a bunch of diehard park nerds, and I stumbled across the group. I forget why. I think a friend of mine posted about it. And I joined the group. And the moderator like flipped out and wrote me this long note. He's like, oh my God, I can't believe you're joining our group. And so I lurk in there a lot. And I see what people have to say. And I see the kind of score. And like they're all like, oh, you could probably kick our ass in this game. I'm like, what? It's 20 years later. I'm 50. My sight is not what it used to be. No, you're much better at this. I couldn't get a score like that back then. Like it's amazing to me. But it's so, that's the other thing that I think is really cool in the industry. And you guys are an example of this too, is in the last 20 years of theme park fandom, let's say 20, nice around 20 to the early aughts. But it started a little earlier in the 90s. With Usenet and rec.arts.theme park and those kind of things way before Twitter and Facebook and all those things, is that, and this has happened in every creative industry, it's movies, in everything, that our audience has an audience.
Yeah.
Right? The people that love this stuff take their love for it, turn it into something else, and have a whole audience for that. And so that's a sea change. Like we didn't have that kind of fandom when I was a kid. You had the Disneyana magazine maybe, or E-Ticket magazine way back when, but that came out, quarterly and was written by a small group of people. And it's like you would meet people in the park and that's how you became fellow theme park nerds. But now you have this massive, communication platform. And so it really does change how we think about attractions, because we know that in one form or another, our attraction, our park, our whatever is going to be, going to have to accommodate user created content in a brick and mortar space. And that is a huge difference in sort of the philosophy of how we approach these things.
That's interesting. And now that we're kind of on the topic of like super fans and things like that, I wasn't going to ask you this question quite yet, but it's too good of a segue to skip up. But when it comes to the attraction itself, obviously, like you said, there's groups and people who are mad fans of this. Is there anything in the ride that those fans don't know about, or Easter eggs
yeah.
that major fans, like the people of that Facebook group that you mentioned, don't know about that you could tune them into?
I think I can't remember if I've mentioned this on other podcasts, but there are a couple of Easter eggs that some of the fans know about, but wider fandom maybe doesn't. Do you guys know that Frank the Pug is in the ride?
I've heard it, but I've never seen him.
Yeah, I've never seen it.
Okay, he's behind your vehicle on the right hand, the inner track. During the crash scene, there's the locksmith's door from the movie, and he's just sitting there. He's not an animatronic or anything. He's just a static figure, but you literally have to twist around in your seat and look behind the vehicle to see him. So that's one. In the safety video, the safety video in the weapons room, where the Doofus and Do Right video, where we give you the instructions for the game and the safety rules of the vehicle, it's all made to look like we based it on sort of. Do you remember Highlights for Children magazine?
Yes.
Used to sit in the doctor's
Yes,
office,
I do.
right? There used to be a comic strip, a cartoon strip in that called Goofus and Gallant, and Gallant was the chivalrous one who was very polite to everybody he met. Goofus was the one who was rude, and it's basically a morality play cartoon for kids, right? So we called ours Doofus and Do Right, and Do Right knows what to do in the vehicle, and Doofus doesn't, and there are passengers on board those vehicles, and they're stylized caricatures of people, and one of them is me. You'll see one of them in a sort of Hawaiian shirt and a beard, and that's me. A lot of the names of the aliens in the dossiers on the big Eggtron screen in the immigration room, a lot of those names are portmanteaus or mixed letter versions of everybody who worked on the ride.
Oh, that's fun.
So we took their names and made them gibberish.
That's like the credits of a movie.
Yeah,
That's like
whenever
kinda
I see stuff like that, I assume it's like
Oh,
names
yeah.
of people that
But there has to be.
yeah.
Well, it's like in the
Yeah,
Spider-Man
yeah.
ride when you're in the queue and you're next to the big files. There's one that says Stan Lee right on it.
Mhm.
You know, I took a picture of
Yeah,
that. It's like
yeah.
stuff like that. You know.
Yeah. And you've seen Stan in the ride too, right? He's in the garbage truck at the
Yes.
beginning.
Mhm.
Yes.
And he's at the end with when Spidey's hanging upside down taking your picture.
Yeah. Yeah.
But what else? There's Steven Spielberg is in the ride.
Yeah. It's his head, correct?
Yeah, his head on a stick. See, you know all this stuff. And that was
I
fun.
told you
That
we
was
liked the
something
ride. I told you we liked it.
That's something he requested actually, which was great.
Aw, that's fun.
That is fun.
And he's got like a Amblin baseball cap on and that kind of thing. It's
That's
fun.
really funny.
Do you know there is a time capsule
No,
hidden somewhere in the ride?
I did not know that.
So during production, we had a bunch of photos and a bunch of construction badges from people who worked on it, and name tags for the ride ops and ephemera stickers and stuff we had made to put on our hard hats and all that kind of stuff. Put it in a little jar, and it's inside the big bug at the end. As they were sculpting it, they sort of sealed it in there, so it won't come out until they tear the ride down.
Oh man.
But yeah, so that's in there. It's. That world is so rich with sort of comedic detail that it felt like we wanted to share all the jokes with everybody. Like we didn't want it to be too inside baseball.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And Universal doesn't really have their equivalent of like, the hidden Mickey or anything like that. So there were subtle things, but it's all those things you knew about. The funny thing is nobody knew about any of that stuff when the ride opened. It wasn't really till internet fandom hit that those things people noticed and published about, and now everybody knows.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And when it comes to Men in Black, when did you become attached to the attraction? When did all of that start for you?
So I'm in the mid 90s. I'm working at Landmark, and Landmark produced attractions for Universal. For a long time, Universal used to, before Universal Creative was around, Universal had the design division in there was called Planning and Development, or Universal P&D. That's who I worked for on Back to the Future. And they did creative development internally, but they also did some third-party concept work with firms like Landmark and BRC and sort of Landmark was sort of the think well of its day, basically. And it's so they did the original concepts for T2 3D and Jurassic Park and some of the early concepts for Spider-Man 3D. And so the Universal ended up producing all those attractions on their own, but with heavy consultation from companies like Landmark. And so I worked on some of those. I worked a little bit on Jurassic Park and a little bit on T2, and I did an alternate concept for Spider-Man that never got made, but just concept work. So not heavy duty production work, not the hard work of actually producing something, but just sort of dreaming them up and coming up with, basic ride layouts and schedules and budgets that Universal would then approve and take and run with or revise themselves or whatever. And so I did a lot of work for that. One of the people that I pitched to across the table in a lot of those meetings was a gentleman named Phil Hedema. If you may have heard of his name before.
Definitely.
So Phil Hedema was the VP of Creative for Universal Creative for a very long time for the parks. Now has his own firm and is a very good friend. But I knew him across the table pitching while working for Landmark. But also around that time, this is around 94, 95, as part of my coming out of the closet, I was singing with the Gay Men's Chorus of Los Angeles, which is a big 150 voice men's chorus in LA. And it was a lot of fun because it was a creative outlet outside of work, right? And as far as part of my coming out, it was spectacular because it was like, here's 160 guys of every size, shape, creed, color, whatever, right? And age. And so it was like, it wasn't coming out into a monoculture of people my age. It was literally a brotherhood of people that I instantly had a million, gay big brothers.
That's
basically.
Awesome. That's amazing.
It was awesome. I was very, very lucky to have that happen at that point in my life.
Yeah.
And one of the people that sang in the chorus was Phil. And so he, of course, recognized me during auditions because I had been working on stuff for him at Landmark. And so we got to be sort of friends outside of a professional environment there. And he was he led a lot of the creative development for some of the concerts. They used to do very elaborate like production numbers and things. We used to do these puppet numbers that were all black light, where the chorus were all dressed in black, and we like the Little Mermaid show at Disney MGM Studios, right? Like we actually did the Little Mermaid once for a Disney show, and the Under the Sea number, Phil and I were the crab puppet. We built it together and performed it together, and so it was this fun sort of brotherhood of really great guys, and I had a very special relationship with Phil, helping him produce shows there. So he calls me up when is this now? This is sort of like fall 1997 or so, like September or so. Mm-hmm. He calls me up and asked me out to lunch, like an official work lunch. And I was working for Landmark at the time. And he says, so here's the deal. We have a major park opening in a couple years. And I said, I know all about it. Islands of Adventure. He said, yeah, you know about it because you've been dabbling on concepts for us there. He said, one of the things we just realized this year is the analysts looked at the schedule for everything. And they realized that after IOA opens in 99, we have no major attractions planned for the following year at the studio park. And they're really worried about sort of siphoning their own attendance. And so we need to fast track an attraction to open a year after IOA at the studios. And he said, the other problem I'm having right now is, he said, look at what's happening in the industry. You had Universal Japan, IOA, Animal Kingdom, Tokyo Disney Sea, DCA. Like you had 5 or 6 major theme park projects happening. And so the industry was tapped. Like there weren't enough bodies to work on these things. And he's like, I know that sounds like a insult that you're like the last person I'm going to. He's like, but I have not been able to talk to anybody about this. None of my staff can work on it, and so I really need somebody who is the right aesthetic for this and the right sense of humor for this. And you were the first person I thought of.
Wow.
And I said, well, that's very flattering that you would entrust me with that. And he says, no, I think you're at the point. I was only a show writer and a sort of junior creative director at that point at Landmark. And he says, I think you're at the right point where you can take on an attraction. And he said, the other reason I want you to do it is we don't have a lot of rides with a lot of animatronics in them. and humor. Like E.T. would be the only one with the handful of baby E.T.s and E.T. figures. But we haven't done a big animatronic show, and especially not one with a sort of a very, very sophisticated sense of humor like Men in Black. And he says, my parallel for it is the Haunted Mansion. And I want this to be our Haunted Mansion, and I know what kind of a Haunted Mansion fan you are. And I literally started to weep, like tear up in the meeting.
I was
I'm like,
literally about to be
I
like,
can't.
when did you poop your pants?
I can't believe this is happening. And so I gladly took the job, and it was a beast, because not only was it twice the budget of any attraction I'd sort of built at that point. It was also, it went from nothing on paper to opening day in 28 months.
Whoa.
Which is unheard of. And that was the schedule. Like, we had no choice. We had to open by April or May of 2000. And so it went very, 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 very fast. And but it was a great team, and I'm so grateful for the experience, because it was trial by fire. It was fake it till you make it. Like, I didn't have that kind of experience before that ride, and I learned on the job and learned from an incredibly talented array of disciplines and people, many of whom I still call friends to this day, and with an IP that was just a joy to work with, because there's so many possibilities, and it's so fun, and it's everything from sleek 60s design to creepy, scary, funny aliens to sleek alien tech. Like, there were so many facets of it that were just really fun to get our hands dirty and dig into. So that's how that came about. It was again a lucky break at the right time, and having befriended and maintained great relationships with very influential people like Phil in the industry who saw something in me that I didn't. And so it was a huge turning point in my life.
It's so funny because over the course of our show, and having talked to different people about attraction design and them working in the industry, almost every single time I've talked to somebody about a big attraction that they've worked on, that is the reason why they were there. It just, the right person, the right time, the right fit, all the stars aligned. It was never because, I'm the number one greatest person of all time, and I'm going to build the greatest attraction ever.
Yeah.
It was never that. It was always, it's a good person in the right place with the right fit. And that's just so awesome to hear that kind of story just play out, because it sounds like it deserved it, man.
Yeah, and it's also about not just timing for me, but the people that we brought on that team. Like, I always tell people, anybody who thinks this is an auteur based industry is sorely misunderstanding it, because like movies, like any other collaborative art form, somebody like me that's the creative director is pointing the way and rallying the troops and getting everybody to go in the same direction. But I'm not the guy who designed everything. That's the talent of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people. And so it's about that too. And so these things happen because they are collective and because they are highly collaborative. It's funny, when I started, there weren't a lot of direct educational paths for this industry, right? Most of the people I knew either came from movies, some of them came from industrial engineering or theater. It was like you ask 20 people in the industry when I started how they got into the industry, you're going to get 20 different answers. But that's changed in the last 20 years. You've got programs like the ETC, Entertainment Technology Center at Carnegie Mellon. You've got Savannah College of Art and Design has a whole track about themed entertainment design. USC Interactive School of Media, which does video games and immersive environments. Like, there are full college classes for this now. And so you're getting a very different kind of multidisciplinary, educated person coming into the industry. It's fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
But then you also have the thing about, like, fans often try to get into this industry, and they want advice for how to get into it, and it's tricky, because I've asked people, well, what do you want to do? And they're like, I want to be you. And I say, well, Dave Cobb is not a job title.
It should be. It should be, Dave. It should be.
And it's one of those things where, again, because of timing and because of my experience up until that point of writing and concepting and having strong skills in pitching those concepts and writing them, That's what got me Men in Black, not because I'm some superstar attraction designer, but because I was at a point in my career where somebody recognized that my individual skill set could translate to something bigger. And that's the key to anybody in the getting started in this industry is, yes, it is an industry of generalists. We like people that wear multiple hats or are interested in lots of different disciplines. That's all great, but you can't get your foot in the door by being a generalist. You have to get your foot in the door by being good at one thing, do one thing really well, better than anybody else, and be able to pitch that. And that's how you get noticed in an industry like this.
It's like Disneyland, how Disneyland about literally every person that was there was a different discipline, and they did whatever they did excellently.
Yeah.
And that's how that place got built, and look at the place now. You know what I mean? It's a tried and true formula that's worked from the beginning of what you could arguably say theme park and themed entertainment was to now.
Well, but the formula,
totally.
I mean, you could argue the formula is that there is no formula.
You could argue, Formula?
Yeah.
What formula?
Circling back to Men in Black.
I want to watch that movie. Men in Black.
I know like the time frame you had was really short. Did you go into it knowing it was going to be an interactive shooting attraction, or were there any other ideas on the table?
Yeah.
Great question. Yes. There were some other ideas. Interactivity really rose to the surface of almost every concept we tried, mainly because the movie is literally about wish fulfillment, right? I want to be that guy. I want to have that gun in my hand. I want to shoot aliens. That's the number one expectation is zapping at aliens. And then after that, comedy, right? So it was a staple of the concept from early on, but it changed forms a couple of times. Early on, it was going to be a thrill ride, more of a thrill ride. It was actually at one point we were going to do a coaster with onboard shooting, and then we realized that won't work because you won't be able to hit anything. And this is, I've mentioned this in other interviews before. For a while, it was actually going, because it was such a short production, we could not engineer a new ride vehicle. We knew we had to use something already available. So either something out there in the world already, or preferably, as the executive said, something that's over an eye away, because we spent a lot of money developing those ride systems, and we might as well reuse them. And it'll save us money and time, because we don't have much of either to get this thing open. And so we looked initially at the Spider-Man vehicle. And we actually did a really rough test where I went and bought a bunch of laser tag kits from the toy store and put the targets around the ride and gave everybody the laser guns, and we rode the ride with the regular program running. And again, it was impossible. You just couldn't target anything because of how dynamic that ride vehicle is. And it's really it's almost an omni-mover in its precision of focus, right? The reason the reason that sides are so high up in that and Transformers is because we only want you looking in one direction. But a game, you're going to want to target yourself. And so it was a profoundly underwhelming and difficult experience when we did our stupid little test on Spider-Man and went, well, that's not going to work. And then we went over and saw Cat in the Hat. And what we loved about it was that we could position it like an omni-mover. That was great. And it was the height requirement was pretty low, so kids could get on it. And then we're like, well, what kind of thrill? Because they only do a couple of spins on Seuss. And so we went on that track and reprogrammed it and tried it at its full spin and went, wow, this is actually pretty thrilling.
On Seuss?
Yeah,
so like,
on Seuss.
On Cat in the Hat, you just went spin crazy.
Yeah. In the maintenance bay, we just sat in it and said, turn it up to how far as it'll go.
Put it to 11.
It was like, woo!
Put it to 11.
Yeah, turn it to 11. And so it was pretty clear that it was the right combination of stable ride that people can shoot from and dynamic moments that we can introduce via spinning or sudden direction changes to have you look in certain areas. And then on top of that story focus, that's what's so great about Omni-Movers and Spider-Man and Transformers, is that ability to sort of focus an audience at something. But yet with that vehicle, we still had this open framework that you could still see all around you.
Yeah. It's funny because when we rode the attraction, I knew that it spun, but I wasn't aware of how intense that spinning would get, so that when it actually got to like its peak spin, I actually put my gun down and held on because I got scared, because I was not expecting it to get to that speed. And Nikki's there laughing, and I'm like,
and that's why I had a higher score.
Yeah, you're
just kidding.
fearless with you and your fake gun, your blaster.
Yeah, there's a funny story about the spin though. Like, early on, in addition to the game, there was a number of things that we were trying to do, frankly, to distance and improve upon, distance ourselves from and improve upon Buzz Lightyear, because Buzz Lightyear had just opened in Florida.
Oh yeah, I mean, you can do whatever you want to do to that, and it's an improvement.
Well, a little trivia: the people that did the game system is the same company. They're called They're called Heads Up Technologies. They are out of Dallas. They do laser tag arenas, and they also do like flight control systems for airplanes. So they're all over the map.
Whoa!
But they did the game system for Buzz Lightyear, and then we asked them, can you do the same thing and have it untethered, so it's not, or unmounted, so it's not just the Gatling gun on the front of the vehicle.
Yeah, that was my main problem.
We developed.
That was my main problem.
Yeah. Well, and proof in the pudding is all the subsequent Buzz Lightyears have been similar corded, tethered guns. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So, but we tried to separate ourselves a lot from that ride. So, first thing was when we were working out the capacity of the ride, because there are only 6 passengers, we needed to get to a certain number. I think we were shooting for 17 or 1800 an hour, e-ticket level, people eater. Well, we needed like 4 or more vehicles, like in a train, to make that work on a single track. And then the ride became really, really long, and everything was really far away from you because of the length of the train and the reach envelope from that. Until one of our guys was like, well, why don't we do 2 tracks and have them compete side by side? And so we did the calcs for that. There's a program called Arena that's used for, nowadays we do it all in like Unity or whatever. But back then it was a program that you used to plan out assembly lines for like cars and stuff. Uh-huh. And so we proved out the logic of it with that and was like, oh, that's great. Oh, wait, what does that give us now? That also gives us not only 2 completely different experiences visually for each side of the track, it gives us the chance for competition, and then it gives us the chance to actually shoot at each other. Ooh. And so that moment of seeing the other vehicle full of people or full of aliens and zapping at them was not part of the original concept when we laid the track out. That scene in the tunnel after Central Park was supposed to be the push the red button scene, and it was supposed to be the super speed tunnel moment where you went really, really, really fast. And then we realized we're never going to do that with this vehicle. It's never going to feel correct. You can look to the side and see that you're going 2 miles an hour. Yeah. So we don't have a protected view shed like Spider-Man or Transformers. So we said, what else can we do? And somebody mentioned, what if we shot at each other? So that's how that scene came out, and it's, I think, one of the coolest things about the ride. Mm-hmm.
And now I can make the joke, I shot your exhaust port.
Yeah, the fusion exhaust port. And then the other thing that came out of that was during playtesting, the original intent was that there were certain aliens, and you'll probably be able to figure out which ones they are. They're sort of big baddies that are every once in a while along the track that were basically a timeout, that if you shot them in time, they did not hit you when they fired and you did not spin, right? And you got more points. Yeah. But what that resulted in is a ride where if you're good at the game, the ride really sucked. Because you just didn't spin.
Yeah.
And so there's a few hard spins in there. Like the first guy, the big smoke blast alien, right after at the end of the road there, after the plane crash, he's one. Another one is the guys in the alleyway, the 2 little bug aliens that reveal themselves. That's a hard spin. Those always happen. But those were initially intended to be like a video game and change every time you rode, but it's made for a terrible ride.
When I know that the big finale of this attraction is the giant bug. Like, this thing is massive, and you have to go right into it. So there's no way of going around this thing.
Yeah,
obviously.
Yeah, Babs.
Its name is Babs.
Her name is Babs.
Oh my God, it's amazing.
That stands for big ass bug.
I love it so much. It's amazing. So obviously, designing something of that scale is probably rather challenging. Was that probably the most challenging portion of the design process, or was there something else that beat out Babs?
It was, because things like the track layout and the structural walls of the building, all of that stuff had to be locked at a certain point, and we just simply weren't done with the actual scenic design. We had concept level design for all of that stuff. We knew there's going to be a big bug there, but once you get the walls in, it's like, all right, well, we can't move that wall. So how do we make this work? A perfect example is she used to have a big claw on her left, audience right, as well as the big one that's on the right, that we had to take out because there just wasn't any room for it. I actually have the little piece from the model that was that. When we took it out, I'm like, all right, I'll take that as a souvenir. That bug, well, a lot of people ask me if it's Edgar, if it's a version of Edgar, and it's not really. It's meant to evoke Edgar's style, but it was a completely different alien. It was actually designed by Neville Page. If you watch the show Face Off,
I know exactly who Neville Page is. Yeah,
Neville's a great guy, and he was a toy designer, industrial designer. When I met him, he was actually Phil knew him. Phil Hedman knew him because he was an instructor at Art Center, I think. We hired him, and he did the vehicle, the guns, about half of the aliens, and the big bug. And this is all before he worked on big movies. Like, the next job he got after us was Minority Report, and then after that it was Avatar and Tron Legacy, and the Star Trek reboot. Like, yeah, he's like, I have lunch with him every once in a while, and I'm always like, I can't afford you anymore. What are you talking about? You're in the big leagues now. But he's an amazingly talented guy, and again, worked within those restrictions of the structure and the reach envelope for the vehicles. All that stuff is super exacting, and yet made something that still feels authentically coming out of the ground at you. My only regret there is we did have an interior to the bug planned, and it was all gooey, and there was like a little throat uvula over your head, and it was really gross.
You drip water on people,
and yeah, but we decided that it really was better as this spinning moment, and it's meant to be filled with fog, right? It's LN2 and steam to create the big voluminous cloud like you do on T2, and it runs sometimes. Sometimes they turn it off, which makes me a little sad. But we decided, you know what? That's a more palpable moment anyway. Let's end with that. And in a way, we sort of used it story-wise as our explosion fade to black moment, and then come up on the scores like you know what I mean? It's like a cinematic cut almost. Mm-hmm. But I wish we could have finish that out. But I do love all the details on there. There's a lot of targets on Babs that are worth quite a bit. If you shoot at her. And also, the red button moment there, people have discovered that if you hit it rapidly enough, pop, 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 you can actually get it like twice.
Whoa.
So yeah. And that wasn't intended. I think that's a glitch. But people are exploiting it. So,
That's funny. And you had mentioned earlier on, you were kind of talking about, like, as a designer, there's always things and attractions that you would like to retool or touch up or refurbish and things, but you said it was your own thing. But given the opportunity, is there anything about Men in Black that you'd love to change or retool or bring back, if anything?
Well, I mean, modern shooting gallery rides don't use a completely different targeting system. Like, back when we made that, it was the same as Buzz Lightyear, which are basically infrared receivers. Those guns are glorified TV remotes, basically, and so embedding those in the characters was a chore, because there's little wire mesh holes that the things are behind. Those have a lot of maintenance to them because they have to spray dust out of them every couple of weeks so they don't clog up, and that's on every character, and there's over 100 in the ride.
Oh my God,
so
that is intense.
It's and each character has upwards of 15 to 20 sensors sometimes. So it's a antiquated technology. So one of the first things I would do is the modern rides like Buzz Lightyear Shanghai and the Justice League things that Sally did for Six Flags, they all use a camera tracking system. So even though this works for media or for physical props and sets, is basically on that set you have a camera looking at it, and in software you define target zones where the camera can see, and that ties into the game. So you can make anything a target, and there's no maintenance or cleaning. Right. And so it's funny. That technology was not available to us then, so we didn't. It would never have been a conscious choice to do it because it just didn't exist. But there is one thing we did as a mock-up that didn't happen that predates that, which is kind of fascinating. One of the things we found in playtesting was that people got frustrated when they knew when they hit something because the eyes change on the alien or they move or whatever, and the only indication that you miss is the red light on the back of the gun, and people got frustrated that you couldn't tell where you were missing. And so we did a mock-up where we took a very small section of the brownstone set and we used a video camera and a 1999 era video projector, which is a lot lower than the cinema projectors you see now. A lot more expensive, a lot lower resolution, and we made a very, very quick animation of like green splat, like a paint splat, like a paint gun missing, like a dripping down, right? So that whatever you're and the camera watched where you were, and wherever you shot, if it wasn't a target, it would create this little like projected on the wall.
Interesting.
And we called it the missed hit initiative. We're like, it was just a quick. It was just a quick and dirty, like, hey, is this possible? And it was, but it was horrifically expensive at the time. It was something like, to cover the entire ride, it was going to cost us like $30 or $40 million.
Whoa!
So, and nowadays that kind of projection and camera technology is fairly accessible and much less expensive.
Yeah.
But so that's not what the current stuff is, but that's kind of what it is, right? I remember seeing that technology in a ride for the first time about 8 or 10 years ago, and went, oh my God, somebody finally did it. We were talking about this 20 years ago. So those are the big things. I would change the targeting. I would update that. I would probably update the scoring. I would update the screens on board the vehicles to be more interesting and not just be numeral counters, but have some sort of alien tech look and screens. I would want to change out a bunch of aliens. I would probably want to add a few more A-list ones with multiple movements and stuff.
More style ones.
Yeah.
More movements.
Yeah, I would probably want to fix the big bug at the end and make that ending a little more spectacular somehow. Maybe registered projection inside the mouth, inside the guts.
Oh, that would be cool.
Yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of things we could do. It's funny, when the new movie came out, I was sort of secretly waiting to see it so I could sort of formulate in my head a bunch of ideas and send them to my friends at Universal and go, "Hey, you should do this." But but not that anybody there cares about me now. But but the movie didn't do great, and which is sad because I think there's a life for an attraction. If not reboot, at least revamp it, and add some stuff. And the fact that it's been there 20 years, if it ever gets that, it'll be the icing on the cake. At this point, it's fine. It works. It's a testament to the fact that it works the way it is. I'm so tickled that people still enjoy it.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's, like you said way earlier on, it's a testament to what you guys have done. The fact that it's been around this long, it's incredible. It's so cool.
I think the nature of that park, it's not like just a regional park, so there's fresh people going in all the time.
Yeah, like us.
Like for Gabe and I 3 years ago, it was brand new experience, first time we had ever seen it, and I feel like it gets a lot of that over the years. Brand new fans.
Yeah. And even though the attraction is what I guess some people would consider quote old, it's still extremely impressive.
Yeah,
really impressive.
One of the moderators on that 900 Club. On Facebook, a guy named Nick. He was the one who sort of reached out to me when I joined the group and freaked out. And he and I have been friends online now and chatting, and he's a super nice guy and a huge theme park nerd and local guy in Orlando. And he'll send me photos of him riding with his kids, and his daughter's like 10 and she can max out to 999.
Whoa.
And it just makes my heart sing, because it's like, this is a thing for him. This is a thing for him and his daughter. This is a thing that they've been doing since she was like 4. And, she's got a little brother that she's going to introduce it to. And maybe when she grows up, if it's still around, she'll introduce it to her kids. Like, that's, you don't get into this industry expecting that at all. Like, I never thought I would look back on this ride the same way Imagineers of the 80s and 90s look back on Haunted Mansion. Like I said before, that's exactly the same time difference.
Yeah.
And I in my head, I still can't put it in that echelon of things. And the fact that fans still find meaning in it and find traditions with their kids to hand down is super humbling and really lovely.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we'll take Erin on it when she's old enough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll tell her where to shoot. Well,
Yeah.
no, Nikki will tell her where to shoot because you're better than me, clearly.
Switching gears one more time, having worked on Warner Brothers Abu Dhabi, designing theme parks in the U.S. is probably very different to that. What are some of the challenges that come with designing themed entertainment in other countries?
Well, just getting stuff built because,
This is rather simple answer.
I mean that part of the world like has had a boom, since the early aughts, late 90s. And so yes, there's a lot of construction there. There's a lot of local talent we can hire, but this kind of specialty stuff like sculpting and rock work and cartoon scenery and those kind of things and aging and finishing, those aren't necessarily there. And so a lot of the heavy lifting on a park like that was using local talent, but bringing on our own art directors to sort of train them. And frankly, that's what Disney did for something like Tokyo Disney Sea. Right?
Yeah.
Those resources and talent bases and skill sets were not as widely spread even in Japan for the Tokyo parks, but now they are. And so, and that was a challenge of any international project is that. People often ask if it's about the content and adapting it for a local audience. And my answer to that is sort of twofold. No, you don't need to, because they know these properties better than you think they do.
Yeah.
Especially ones like Tom and Jerry. Like the most popular cartoon characters in the park are Tom and Jerry, not Bugs and Daffy. They know Bugs and Daffy. They know
crazy.
Scooby.
Wow.
That's crazy to me.
But the reason for that, but when I tell you why, it totally makes sense. The reason for that is Tom and Jerry requires no translation.
Yeah, there's no dialogue.
And Tom and Jerry has played in syndication for no money on every tiny TV station everywhere in the world for 40 years.
Wow.
And so everybody knows it. And so that was one thing. Learning what they do know about the characters and what we need to reinforce or what we need to introduce about the characters was an education. And then there's minor little cultural things like we have a lot of people that go to that park that either wear traditional Arabic dishdash, which are the white sort of robe garments, or abaya, which is the women wear the black ones, and sandals. And we've got a suspended coaster that your sandals will fly off. So we had to account for that in the load station and put little shoe cubbies and make it part of the signage to say, before you get on, leave your shoes here.
That's interesting.
And then very, very subtle things. Like people often ask me, did you have to change anything about, female characters like Wonder Woman? And the truth is, no, we didn't have to change a thing. She's Wonder Woman. She looks like you expect her to. But one of the things we added to her for the personal appearances in the park is Wonder Woman has a version of her costume where she has a little cape, like a little capelet on. And she's wearing that in the park, not for modesty reasons, because she's still got her suit on. What it's for is in case she takes a picture next to somebody and they put their arm around her, that they're not touching her bare skin. Because some people in the region might be offended by it. Now, granted, most people aren't. It is a far more permissive and progressive society than people give it credit for. I had a great time there, even as a queer man. I was very open, even with the client, and it was never a problem. So it's not that that part of the world doesn't have its challenges, and it will and will continue to have some social change, but things like this park, I think, help with that because they sort of show the universality and global sort of attitude towards this kind of entertainment. And one of my favorite stories was the day I left the park. So I've been working on this thing for a decade, right? It's my last day. I literally am flying out the next morning. I'm making my last loop around everything, watching everybody enjoy everything, sort of saying my goodbyes. And I see this group of like 20 or 30 Arabic women all in full abaya and giggling and taking selfies and having a great old time. And they all had Bugs Bunny ears on top of their abaya. Every last one of them was wearing Bugs Bunny ears. And it's disrespectful for me to go up and take a picture, but I went up to them and I said, I really, really love your ears. And she looked at me. She couldn't have been more than maybe 22, 23. She looked at me with the biggest smile on her face, like almost tears in her eyes. And she looked at me and said, they make me so happy.
Oh, man. Ugh.
And I'm tearing up now talking about it. Like I literally burst into tears. I'm like, I'm so glad you enjoy it. And kept walking, But it's moments like that where you realize, right, these people are going to make of this what they need it to be, and we are merely providing. Yes, we're providing high-tech attractions, and we're providing thrills, and we're providing memorable characters and stories they can experience. But we're also people talk about storytelling in theme parks, and it's a misnomer to think that every attraction has a story, like a narrative, right?
Yeah.
Some of them are pastiche, some of them are just thrills. Like, what's the story of Space Mountain? Come on now.
Yeah.
And yes, there's a treatment for one. They wrote one back in Imagineering a long time ago. Yes. But the guests don't get that. The guests don't necessarily grok that. What I always say, and I used to say this in professional talks that I would do, is that the most important story that we can create in a theme park is the story the guests create themselves.
Yeah.
That's true.
And this goes back to that your audience as an audience thing. What's important in an attraction is not the plot line of the attraction or the story of the attraction. It's how the guests interpret it to enjoy it with their family and friends, to tell their family and friends about it afterwards, and post about it on social media and do all those things. Because when they absorb it into their hearts like that, that the story works.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what I find really, really cool about going from U.S. parks to, parks abroad is that if you were to take photos and videos of people enjoying the parks with their family and their friends, there's literally no difference to what's happening at our parks and their parks. And ultimately just kind of all boils down to the fact that we're all humans looking for an escape and having fun and making those memories, regardless of where we're from, what language we speak, what religion, anything. Right. The fact that it really just all boils down to being people. And I think there's something intrinsically special about that when it comes to the themed entertainment industry. And I think it's something that kind of gets overlooked, because I think a lot of people tend to look at the industry and be like, oh, it's theme parks, it's for kids. Not really. There's so much more to it. And I think a lot of the stories that you've actually shared with us today point to that. The moment with the Bugs Bunny ears, the moment of people coming off of the attraction and talking about how much they loved it, the memories they're making with their kids. That's all something that is
universal,
just universal as a whole.
Yep, totally. And it's, I think it's why people stay in this industry, right? This is not an industry to get in if you want to be a multimillionaire.
that is a high I don't want to chase.
Yeah. Right. And it has its challenges. It's a very boom and bust industry. It's highly dependent on the world economy, as we're seeing right now with the thousands of layoffs in Imagineering and Universal, and it's really sad. Lifelong designers that I've worked with forever are suddenly out of work, and so. And this, not to make light of it right now, but that's happened in the past. Like it's always been a boom and bust industry. It's never been that stable, mainly because, again, unlike creative industries that design something for mass production all around the world, we're making things that are in one place. Yeah. And how many of those are going to be built every year around the world? So it's very special to be a part of it. It is a responsibility and a challenge and an honor, frankly, that I don't take lightly at all. And every time I think about the stuff that I've gotten to do in this industry, I pinch myself, and like one of the most fun things I do every year for the last 2 or 3 years, I've been on the TEA awards committee, the THEA Awards, which people don't know are like the theme park Oscars, basically. And the awards committee is an independent group of industry professionals and some of the Lifetime Achievement Awards people and people like me in the industry and we get together for a few months and look at submissions that have been put in for the awards and award them every year. We just announced the last slate a couple weeks ago. And it's an incredible process and it's a lot of fun. But it's also like I'm in the room around the table. Well, this year was virtually, obviously. We did it all on Zoom.
Yeah.
But I'm sitting at the table with Joe Rohde and Kim Irvine and Bob Gurr and Tony Baxter. And I'm not a fan. I'm a peer. And it's almost painful for me to say that. And I know that sounds like false humility and false humble, but it's the truth. Like, I used to be you guys.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the fact that I'm sitting there with these folks, being at 50, being like the young one in the room, which is always a blast, it's gobsmacking every single time. And I've had really wonderful conversations with those folks and gotten to nerd out to them a little bit about the influence they've had on my life and my career. And so I'm incredibly lucky even for experiences like that professionally in the industry beyond my work. It is a very small, group, family, if you want to call it that, of people, because it's a small industry to begin with. Everybody kind of knows everybody.
Yeah, that's really, really cool to have that kind of a moment. And honestly, on a much smaller level, us having this show and being able to have a dorky outlet and have the opportunity to speak to people like you is kind of like that same feeling. It's like, oh, I get to actually talk to somebody who's made an impact on my life in a certain manner.
Definitely.
Who's developed these attractions and made me feel a certain way. Just like all the movies have made me feel a certain way, you know what I mean? And that's a much smaller level, but is something at least parallel to a certain extent. And you kind of you touched upon it briefly, but one of the last things I want to ask you before we let you go, because we've had a very long conversation.
Yeah,
at
my
this
drink's
point.
gone.
Yeah, your drink's gone. That's how you know the ice is melted. So you know it's been a long conversation, but a good one nonetheless.
Yeah.
The one thing I want to talk to you before we let you go is obviously you mentioned about the layoffs and COVID-19 and how the industry as a whole is kind of fickle, if you want to use that word. It's really based, like you said, it's based on the economy and things like that. Where do you see the themed entertainment industry going after COVID? Because there's definitely going to be changes. It's just kind of like one of those things of, I don't know how it's going to change, but it's going to change.
Yeah, it is. I mean, a silver lining is I hope we see an influx of sort of young, fresh talent. I hope that happens.
Yeah.
And that's hard for me to say, knowing that a lot of institutional knowledge from some very seasoned people in this industry lost their jobs, and that's why. Like, it's hard for me to say those two things, but it's the truth that maybe this will mean that the people that come to this industry are a little more choosy about it because they have to be.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it. I also think practically there's going to be things that we just have to deal with as a society in terms of public health and cleanliness and hygiene and things in public places like this. Even after a vaccine, we're still going to have to address it.
I can't lick the railings in front of Star Tours anymore?
Exactly. Right.
Oh,
right. No, I wouldn't do that.
Bummer.
I think that's going to change. And so queuing and I think there's going to be lots of iteration of what that is, because it has to change somehow.
Yeah.
I don't know what that is, to be honest.
Yeah. It's a hard answer to come up with.
It is. I think that all of this it's one of the reasons we ended up still doing the Thea Awards this year. We had a long discussion back in February when we started about, do we want to do this? Or March or April when we started. Like, do we want to do this year? Is it right to celebrate this when people are losing their jobs? And what we realized was, look, excellence is excellence. Let's keep it moving forward, because regardless of where the parks are right now, this is a moment in time that we need to recognize. And so what I'm hoping is that, and because we realize this going through all of these entries, is that people value this stuff, not just because it's more pop culture entertainment, but because it's outside your house and it's with other people and it's with your family. Yeah. And theme parks are a communal experience, and we are going to be thirsty for those after all of this. Disneyland and Universal are going to be crazy packed once it's safe enough to go back, and we're all going to, like, I've already told my friends, like, when I see you after all this, I'm going to hug you to the point of it's going to get a little uncomfortable for you. Like, it's, I'm going to hug the stuffing out of you.
That's a normal
right?
hug
Like,
for
so, yay.
I'm not a
Hooray.
hugger, so what?
but yeah, it's really hard to predict where it's going to go. But there's going to have to be a certain amount of innovation. There's going to have to be a certain amount of new blood. And I'm primed and ready to see where it goes.
Yeah, I think at a certain level, obviously there's hesitancy and a certain level of sadness that kind of comes with the territory, obviously, because you mentioned, and we know very well that a lot of people have lost their jobs because of this, but there is a certain slight level of excitement to see innovation happen, because it doesn't happen all the time. So, I am, I guess not excited. I guess it's, what's the word I'm looking for, Nikki? What's the word I'm looking for? Read my mind for me.
I can't do that. I don't have that power.
I'm excited at the prospect of new things happening. So I think it should be interesting to see kind of where the industry goes in the future. But But man, what a great conversation we had today, man. Thank you so much for joining us. I really appreciate it.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me on. And anytime you want to nerd out, once this is all over, we'll go get a kungaloosh together over at Trader Sam's.
Oh my God, that sounds amazing.
Trader Sam's.
Oh, you just made us real sad.
I know. We're drinking out of our tiki glasses.
Yeah, we're drinking out of our tiki glasses.
Pretending.
Hooray.
Pretending. I have my collection of tiki mugs in a box that haven't come out because I can't face the look at them.
Oh. I think my first park visit libation will probably be a Carthay Manhattan. Would be my choice.
I think for me, in park, it's literally just going to be a expensive beer. I'm going to sit down and watch people be happy. That's all I want to do. Yep. I don't even want to go on a ride. I don't want to go on a ride.
No.
I just want to experience and be there and live in that moment. That's what we do. All
I'm the same way.
And that's what Nikki, before COVID and all this happened. In the before times, that's what Nikki and I would do. We'd get drinks and sit down and just
people watch
and absorb the experience of being there. And I think that's at least helped us a little bit get through this experience. Yeah. Just sat down and do that. And then outside the park, I am ordering my zombie. I want a zombie at Trader Sam's. That is what I'm going for. And I'm buying the mug, damn it.
Excellent.
But yes, thank you again so much for joining us. I really appreciated you taking the time to sit down and talk with us about all this dorky goodness. Now, if people want to follow you or get to know you a bit more, where can they follow you on social media if there's any place?
So on Twitter, I'm Dave Cobb, all one word, DAVECOBB. Same on Instagram, same on YouTube. All three of those are Dave Cobb. I'm also on TikTok now as E_ticket. That's mostly me duetting with people because I'm a huge karaoke nerd. So it's not theme park content. You're going to see me singing, basically. Yeah, those are the big ones. And LinkedIn as well. If people have like professional questions or anything, I'm on LinkedIn. Easy to find there as well.
Yeah. And by the way, everybody who's going to go look Dave up, if you go to Google and type in Dave Cobb, you're just going to get the Grammy nominated musical artist. So that's not the Dave Cobb you're looking for.
Yeah, I get mistagged as him in so many tweets and Instagram posts because I got to Dave Cobb before he did. He's Dave Cobb 7 on Twitter, and he's a huge music producer, and I get mistagged as him all the time. And what the funniest thing is, when the park opened in Warner Brothers, one more story. When the park opened in Warner Brothers in 2018, the other movie that opened that summer was A Star Is Born, and he was the producer of the soundtrack, and so we both kept getting tagged for this big new thing, but as the wrong person. And so he ended up messaging me privately on Twitter. He's like, this is pretty funny. I'm like, yeah, we should meet up in LA sometime and have lunch and take a photo, post it, and watch the internet melt.
Internet might break.
He's a super nice guy. I just find it hilarious that people think I'm a music producer. So it actually says in all my profiles, not the famous music producer.
But karaoke lover.
Yeah.
Oh, well, thank you so much, Dave. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Appreciate it.
Galaxy filled up with millions of stars, from Venus and Saturn to Neptune and Mars. Worlds to explore, and they're really not far. It's the universe and you.
I feel like I could get along with Dave so well that me and him could just get drinks at Trader Sam's and just chill and talk themed entertainment forever.
Oh yeah.
He's such a cool guy.
Yeah, no, definitely.
And the information that he was able to shed on a lot of the developmental process of, MIB or even, the Mask 40 attraction that he did was so cool.
Yeah.
It's fun to kind of get into the depths of the creative process when it comes to creating attractions like that, especially attractions like MIB where you and I have loved it for so long.
Mm-hmm.
So-
Yeah, and it just seemed like the different aspects, and different budgets and different like ways of thinking and approaching a project. It was really interesting to hear.
Yeah, the difference between building like Survivor the ride versus MIB,
Yeah.
and the money difference between the two, and like you said, just how to be smart about it.
Exactly.
So, thank you so much to Dave for taking the time to chat with us on the show. Hopefully we'll be able to have him on another time. I know
Yeah.
that he was interested in coming on and just doing like a dork out session. So hopefully we could do something similar to that in season 5.
Oh Lord.
Are you able to process the fact that it's season 5,
No.
the next episode that we do?
No.
It's insane.
No, it
It's
doesn't
been
feel like
4
we've been
years.
doing it that long.
Well, I feel like to a certain extent for me, it feels weird because I was podcasting for like 2.5 years before this.
Yeah.
So half of me like wishes that we had just done this outright, and then this would be season 7. You
Yeah.
know, that would be absolutely insane. But I think I learned some stuff from then, and now I'm applying all that knowledge to this
Yeah.
iteration of a show.
Yeah, you worked out some of the kinks before
Pretty much.
jumping on board with me, where I literally do nothing except talk.
Lucky you have the easiest job.
I appreciate you.
I direct you sometimes. I point you in the direction and just say, go
Yeah.
that way.
Yeah.
But no, sometimes it's really hard for me to just be able to comprehend the fact that we've been doing this for 4 years now,
Yeah.
and all the different topics and all the different subjects and all the different people.
And just life
Yes.
changes. Like we didn't have Aaron when we started this.
Yeah. I mean, like partially, I like the idea that the progress of our life has been recorded
Yeah.
via the show.
Uh-huh.
Not having a kid, being pregnant, having a kid, going to theme parks and experience it with a kid.
Yeah.
It's changed over those 4 years, which I find really, really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an aspect to that I appreciate, but also just in general, the fact that it's 4 years coming on 5 seasons now, coming up soon, that I'm just appreciative that I have an outlet for this dorkiness.
Yeah.
You
You need it.
it. Thanks, Nikki. I'm appreciative that there's an outlet and also an audience that likes listening to this nonsense that we have going on here, whether or not it's our banter, you making fun of me making fun of you, or the interviews or the topic episodes that we have. I'm really thankful for all of that, and everybody who's listening, thank you so much for being a part of this journey of ours. It's just beginning, really, and hopefully we'll be around for much longer.
Yeah.
Going on seasons 5, 6, 7, who knows? I mean, there really is no plan to stop.
There's not, no.
There's no plans for us to stop making Theme Park Duo podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So, wherever life takes us, we'll adjust to it and stuff like that. But I'm excited about the future. I'm
Yeah.
excited about the growth of the show. I'm excited about the future content. I'm excited about future guests. Being able to sit down with wonderful people that we've met over the past 4 years and creating content with other content creators. That's just the idea that really excites me.
Yeah.
So, just really want to say huge thank you, like I did last episode because we missed our 100th episode. Thank you to everybody who listens to the show. Thank you for everybody who's helped contribute to the show in any shape or form. Whether or not that's leaving a 5-star written review on iTunes, whether or not that's being a guest, whether or not that's a retweet or a like on Facebook and Twitter, on YouTube.
Whether or not that's emailing me cat photos.
Yeah, whether or not you've
Thank
fallen
you.
into the trap of sending Nikki
Thank
random
you.
things. What?
Oh, you just stopped talking.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, you said random things and then your eyes got glassy and you just stopped.
Because I was
talking.
waiting for you to react.
Oh, I don't
Usually
know.
you react.
Yeah, when I have
I
something
said
to react
I said
to.
falling into the trap of sending Nikki random
It's
things.
not a trap.
Yes, it is.
No, it was an open invitation.
It's a trap.
What is trapping
It's a
about?
trap.
What's
a
trapping
trap.
about it? There's no negative repercussions for the sender.
That they have to contact you.
That's so mean. and
FYI, you're not even really contacting me. You're contacting Gabe, and then
Oh,
he's
that's-
like,
that's very
"Hey,
accurate."
Nikki, someone sent you a cat photo."
Then I forward it to you and just show it to you.
By the way, Gabe has recorded this whole thing with a daisy in each ear.
Well, that's because our daughter came home who had
Yeah.
daisies in her ear. They're like, look, Papa has daisies in his ears.
Yeah.
And then they haven't left.
Yeah, and now they're being squished by his headphones, and
Yes,
it's
they
kind
are.
of comical. But yeah, so just while you're listening to this, imagine Gabe with a daisy tucked in each ear.
That's a terrible image. Why would you say that?
I don't know, you're making fun of me. I decided to just
Throw me under
share
the bus.
what I'm seeing.
Throw me under the bus.
No, I'm sharing what I'm seeing.
Throw me under the daisy bus.
Daisy, what?
The daisy bus.
I don't know.
You never seen the daisy bus?
No.
They drive by and sell daisies. What?
It's just so random.
It's like the ice cream
Okay.
truck, but it's the daisy
It's
truck.
the daisy truck?
The
Okay,
daisy
I'll
truck.
look out for it.
Yeah, you never. Oh, there. Oh, you missed it.
Oh,
It was
darn.
right outside our window.
Darn.
Darn it. They drive really fast. It's quite dangerous. It's like around like 50 or 60 miles per hour. I'm not sure why the daisy truck decides to drive.
They don't actually want to sell daisies.
They just
then?
want to show off that they have the daisies.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's what it is.
Okay, this has gone too far.
Off the rails.
Off the
It's on
rails.
brand though, so it's
Yeah,
fine.
true.
Of course, the season finale episode has us going off the rails, talking about the all foreboding daisy truck. So
Dun, dun,
dun dun dun. But yes, no, thank you from the bottom of my heart.
Yeah.
Yeah, for listening to the show and appreciating what we do here. So it makes it all the better for us to hear from everybody who listens to the show, or via email, whether or not it's Nikki's cat photos, or responding to Twitter conversations, or even just reaching out and being like, hey, I really appreciate the show. Even seeing us in public at like Knott's or
Saying hi.
any
We
place
love
that we
that
go
so
to.
much.
It makes a world of difference. So you ever see us out there in the world, come up and say hi to us. We'd love to chat with you. Like it makes so much of a difference for us, because it makes what we do here that much better.
Yeah.
So this brings us to the end of season 4 of the Theme Park Duo podcast. Whoa, bro, it's crazy. Thank you, everybody, for listening to this week's episode. As always, if you appreciate the show, if you like the show, and you want a free way to support the show, make sure you head on over to any of the platforms that you listen to the show and give us a review. If you listen on iTunes, make sure you head on over there and give us a 5-star written review. It brings us up higher in the standings and makes it easier for everyone to find us and enjoy us like you are right now. And if you haven't already, make sure you follow us on social media. You can follow us at Theme Park Duo on YouTube, Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. So throughout the break, which will be coming back mid-late February, we are active on Twitter and Facebook. So we'll be on there all the time talking to people and stuff like that. So you'll get your fill of Theme Park Duo stuff just via another outlet.
Yeah.
So you can go there. If you want to email us, if you have any questions, comments, concerns, things you want to hear about in season 5.
Yeah,
things
suggestions for episodes.
Yeah.
We're all ears. We would love suggestions.
Yeah, if you guys have any suggestions at all, we obviously want to curate content that you want to hear. So if there are episode topics you want us to talk about, guests you want us to try to reach out to, or anything at all, make sure to send those over to
themeparkduo@gmail.com.
Yes. And as always, everybody, thank you so much from the bottom of our hearts for reaching out, or watching, listening, whatever it may be, following us on social media. We always really, really appreciate it. And as always, there's always a great, big, beautiful tomorrow. See ya!
Thanks for riding with the Theme Park Duo. Make sure to gather all your belongings before the end of the podcast. Bye-bye.